Page number 237. He turned off the road into its decline, slipping in the mud and slush of its drains, tired and forlorn. He groped through the darkness and hoped he would be able to find somewhere to sleep. The moonless sky was silent as Munnu entered the town, but the earth of Bombay, congested by narrow gullies and thoroughfares, rugged houses and temples, minarets and mausoleums, and tall offices, Bombay, land of cruel contrasts, where the hybrid pomp of the rich mingled with the smell of sizzling grease in the black frying pans. Bombay, land of luxury and lazzaroni, Lazzaroni, where all the pretenses of decency ended in dirt and drudgery, in the filth of dustbins and in the germs of disease, where the lies of benevolent patrons were shown up in the sores and deformities of the poor. The earth of Bombay was, that evening, engulfed in chaos. What had happened? Munnu did not know. He had hurried away from the disturbance outside the factories, imagining that he had left the sounds of the mill land behind. But here was the same shouting, only more intense, because it was echoed back by the tall walls from somewhere afar. He emerged from the gullies, in which anxious groups of men stood whispering at the doorways, into Bhendi Bazaar, where wave upon wave of humanity flowed up to a square. He joined the throng, keeping a little apart from it, feeling strangely unmoved by the emotions which stirred the men, though he was curious as to the reason why they were converging. He soon knew. A small fat man appeared on the boards of a platform and harangued, "O Hindu brethren, awake! Do not sleep. If you have any regard for your mothers and sisters, come out of your houses armed with sticks, because our benign government do not take any notice. Although the wives and children of our brothers are massacred and dishonored by Mussalmans, they have moreover issued orders to shoot if more than 5 people are collected together. We must therefore prepare ourselves for our own protection, because our benign government takes away our sticks but does not seize their sticks and knives." What is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is that we should show our Maratha courage to these circumcised Mohammedans. Down with the Mohammedans! Down with Mohammedans! Down! Munnu climbed up the boards of a closed shop to get a full view of the man. He saw a heavy staff swirl in the air and fall on the hoarse voice. End of page 237, now page 238. There were cries of "Hi, hi, killed, murdered." The crowd seemed to grind its teeth for a second. A confused chatter of hard voices ensued. Then there were cries of "Murder the Mussalmans, take your revenge, loot, pillage, burn." The crowd now began to struggle away, pressing towards the square and beyond, into Abdul Rahman Street. A young English officer in khaki, followed by 10 Indian policemen, led a baton charge. Munnu climbed down from the boards of the empty shop at the sight of the officer. He slipped in his eagerness to keep under cover of the dark, feeling that he would be safe if he went in the direction opposite to that of the crowd. He drifted towards Sanders Street. His brain was seething with excitement. His temples drummed. The image of the staff swirling in the air flashed across his mind. The sudden disappearance of the man from the platform meant death, and the grim, tense silence of death cast its shadow before the boy's eyes. He murmured something to himself in a sort of whimpering, self-pitying voice which smothered the dazed expression on his face. He walked along unconscious in a sort of delirium. That was what has happened. What happened? He asked himself, and he looked into the street to find an answer. But the street was just as dark. But the street just stared back at him, filling his mind with its tall, fantastic houses leaning like hard rocks on the narrow length of the roadway, their insides gaping with the eyes of gigantic monsters through the deep shadows of balconied verandas. He thought of the Kangra hills in whose pathways the overhanging cliffs had beaten back his mind with the same brutal answer when once he went out to search for a lost goat. There was the same eerie silence here in the deep pits of the closed shops and the bulging arches as in the blackest shadows of the mountains, heightened by its contrast with the echoes of thunderous noises above, away and beyond, and death stalked the earth in the illusory forms of masses of darkness, as in a nightmare, now slow, sinuous and soft, now sudden, like panting hordes rushing through time and space, convulsed, hysterical and fierce, like the 100 forms of Satan who hounded men to death. He slowed down to reassure himself that he was not engulfed in hallucinatory visions which were frightening him into cowardice. I am a brave hill boy who has walked alone hundreds of times. End of page number 238. Now page 239. Even past graves and cremation grounds. He said to assure himself, "Why should I be afraid? I wonder where Ratan is now. What is he doing? And Hari, Lakshmi and the children must be home, sleeping perhaps. I don't mind being away from them here though. Why is it? Because I have walked away from the mill and I don't want to go back to it." A shriek stabbed the heart of the darkness that spread alarmingly like the recumbent figure of a huge corpse before him. There were loud voices vowing, "Allahu Akbar." He started to run. Looking into a side bazaar, he saw an old man with spindle legs running as fast as he could under the weight of his rags, followed by a giant Pathan. He stood tense and eager, gazing through the distance. Two long-bodied Mohammedans who were coming from the opposite direction with staves in their hands fell upon the old man, who now quaked with fear like a hounded chicken, uttering, "Ram Re Ram, my life is gone." The giant who had followed the wretch stabbed him in the back, crying, "You heathen, you son of Iblis!" The old man shrieked, uttered a groan, and fell with a thud on the road. Munnu turned his back on the hush that followed the tragedy and ran blindly, mistaking the breeze that came from the street towards which he was making for the hoarse whispering of Mohammedan conspirators pursuing him, their victim with their long knives and rapiers. rapiers, rapiers. But as no one touched him, he ran on and on, feeling light and alert, till a very hurricane of noises engulfed his ears, and his eyes met the leaping flames of a big house on fire, the flames almost licking the sky and illuminating the world in a sheer orgy of resplendent red, gold and indigo black. "That is the house of Mulji Madharji's sweet shop, burned down by the Pathans. Don't go, they will kill you," said a Gujarati merchant who stood at the doorway of his house with one hand on the door and the other on the shoulder of a friend whom he wanted to detain. Munnu heard the remark and looked about casually to see if there was some empty space outside the barred doors of a shop or a step at the foot of the rambling stairs of a house where he could rest his head in comfort and safety for the night. Hardly had he withdrawn his gaze when he heard the Mohammedan cries of "Allahu Akbar" rise from under the circle of fire, followed by the noise of stamping feet rushing frantically towards him. He bolted into a gully which led towards the opera house. End of page number 239. Now page number 240. But he was greeted by the howls of a woman who slapped her breasts and tore her hair as she stood by the railings of a veranda, saying, "Where are you, my son? Oh, where are you? Where have you gone?" Munnu dared not go near her, for fear she would think he would assault her. He turned to see if he could go back the way he had come. No, the Pathan marauders were running riot in the street, shouting Allahu Akbar as they broke the doors of the houses with the butt ends of their rifles and staves and flourished daggers in their hands. He stood panic-stricken, certain that he had walked into the valley of the shadow of death. But batches of policemen came running from the direction from which he had been heading, soft-footed, Munnu knew, because they wanted to surprise the rioters. He stepped back into the hall of a shop, afraid now that one of the police might thrust a bayonet into him, and almost as certain as death as he had been a moment ago. The blue uniformed men ran by, however, and even the women seemed to have disappeared. He steadied himself and breathed a deep breath. Then he continued to crawl along, pressing himself to the walls, looking before and behind to make certain that he was not being noticed. As with hesitant steps he reached the end of the lane, he was impelled by curiosity to look back and survey the scene he had left behind. The Pathans were towering over the policemen in a grim hand-to-hand fight. He was absorbed in the anticipation of seeing the dead fall on their backs, and he entered unconsciously into the open opera square where two streams of rioters had met. He was plunged into the very maelstrom of passion. Under the wild, half-smothered cries of Allahu Akbar and Kali Mai Ki Jai, Shivaji Ki Jai, the bodies of Hindus and Mohammedans struggled in murderous embraces. Mar, mar, hit and see, a voice challenged, and was quietened by the thrust of a dagger, so that it fell instantaneously into a tottering fall and expired with the cry, "Killed! Son of an ass, heathen!" The aggressive shouts of the conqueror tore the warm, tense air. This time death is certain, Munnu said to himself as he edged away under the cover of a tram which had drawn up by the curved edge of the square, and he felt the hard impact of large knuckles on at the back of his neck, and then sudden blow on his spine. He was stretched out. As he looked up from where he had fallen, he saw a Mohammedan outlined against the tramway. Page number 241. Now he instinctively closed his eyes and loosened his body to simulate the limpness of a corpse. The Pathan kicked him with the contemptuous whisper of Hindu dog and walked away to where his companions now stood, after having killed as many Hindus as had not run away. The square was soon deserted because the Pathans walked away shouting, stamping, fierce and bloody, and for a moment there was utter silence. Then the cries of the half-dead arose with the swish of sea air and came from the Chowpatty beach, and fugitive forms nestled about as they emerged from the strange unknown corners and vanished into the air. Munnu opened his eyes to scan a triangular flower garden that stood guarded by regular railings beyond the tramway junction. He felt he would go and hide among the shrubs there, but as he strained to lift his head on his elbow, he heard someone writhing in agony, while a stave seemed to strike the earth with a metallic sound. He listened to the convulsed despair of the dying man in extreme nervousness. Escape in that direction seemed impossible. He lay back and held his breath for a minute until he heard the last cry of the wretch. He hesitated between despair and a desire to go to the man, but his body was weighted down by fear, his head bowed down, his eyes half closed by the fatigue of waiting in the dark, and he lay resigned. Suddenly he felt the rush of eager feet about him. "Has my end come now?" he asked himself, but there seemed to be no answer. He lay dumb, ready for his last breath to depart. He had no time to think of the past, and the glow of desire seemed to have left his body. But his end had not come. for 2 men of the Social Service League lifted him and bore him to a shelter in the veranda of a school 100 yards away. Munnu had deliberately closed his eyes in order not to appear undeserving of help. Yet he was aware of everything that was happening to him. He wished he were not conscious. He wished he had really been hurt and had died or fainted, for the slow, long-drawn out torture that had spread through the furnace of his brain like an unending song of fire was unbearable. It had gone on and on and on, consuming all the elements of sensation and burning up the meager resources of nervous energy he had left in him after months of work in the factory. Until now, he was merely a luminous point in the darkness, staring out blankly at the various strata of this hellish night. The volunteers of the Social Service League rested him on a mat on the school veranda. End of page number 241. Now page number 242. On the school veranda, where hurricane lamps illuminated the bodies of a crowd of beggars, paupers and coolies who had ostensibly been rescued from the street where they normally slept. A doctor who looked to Munnu not unlike the brother of Shamnagar Babu because he wore a hat and suit like him, asked him where he was hurt. Munnu just moved his head negatively and lay wrapped in complete inertia. The doctor examined his body, wrote something on the paper and moved on. A volunteer applied a cup of hot milk to his lips and Munnu got up to drink, grateful and humble. The sweet hot liquid rushed the blood to his face. If only he had laid down to sleep he might have risen, soothed and balanced in the morning. But he opened his eyes to his surroundings. The veranda was dark. There was a horrible smell of urine and dung hanging over it, and the whispers of poor rose like thick flakes of cotton in the closed air. Munnu tried not to breathe through the reek too deeply, but his eyes were taking in the disgusting outlook of the diseased, broken men about him, some crouching with their sleek bellies, some bending over their hollow chests, some snoring woodenly as they slept against a wall, some contemplating their wounds and sores with weak eyes that blinked not, some coughing in unending fits of jerky reiterations. The boy was going to open his mouth to breathe a word to himself. A gust of musty, damp pepper and foul reek of excrement assailed him. He shut his mouth and only sniffed at the air. He dilated his nostrils. Again there was the dirty smell going through. He shut his mouth and only sniffed at the air. He dilated his nostrils. Again there was the dirty smell going through him. He decided to bolt from the place. It was unbearable. He would go and sleep on the sea beach. There were booths there which lay empty all night. He had seen them. He hoped nobody else had thought of the idea and that the place would be empty. He got up and began to walk. No one seemed to take any notice of him. The door was straight in front of him and people were coming and going. He emerged from the gate. He realized he would have to run 300 yards to the chowpatty. Will I be quite safe? But he did not wait to receive the answer. He only babbled. Let come what may. I shall at least get away from this. And the pictures of the men he was leaving behind shimmered in his brain against the currents of strange thoughts about himself walking barefoot on the hot sand of the road to Shamnagar. End of page number 242. Now page 243. Of his aimless wandering in the civil lines at Daulatpur and the streets of Bombay. He was running, and the movement of his body transfigured space and time into a blank. It transformed the memory of the mutilations he had seen that evening into a prolonged moment of uncertainty. Above the confusion of cries, the din of shouts, and the cruel impact of brutal bands, above even the hum of innumerable waves which were billowing before his eyes to the edge of the far rocks, he ran as if he were a rocket of fire going to be quenched in the sea. He was not conscious of his body. He shot past vast buildings across the Chowpatty Bridge in a devastating whirl. He sighted a broken wagon which was covered with jute awning. He knew it was a coconut shop during the day. He slowed down, panting, and made for it. The marble stone of Tilak stood small and insignificant against the vast sheet of the water which swished like a snake and spilled the white foam from its position on the shores of India. He mounted into the wagon and groped around. There was plenty of space. He lay down and rested. The anarchy of the ocean drowned him to sleep. When he awoke late in the morning, he did not know where to go, what to do, and what his soul wanted. The coconut stall did not open till the afternoon, so no one had come to disturb him. He sat staring at the sunshine which flooded the wagon and heard the unending roar of the sea beyond the jute cloth curtain. The night had been cold and he had shivered at dawn, but now it was quite warm, even hot, and it was so restful. Were it not that he felt this emptiness in his soul and hunger in his belly. He tried to console himself by feeling that he deserved the leisure after months of having to get up early at dawn. It was like the old days in the village, he felt, when he used to laze around in the afternoon and have a siesta while the cattle grazed. The wild pastures of the green sea had indeed something of the freedom of the open fields. The mere habit of getting to the factory in the morning, however, had given him a conscience about work, and his conscience pricked him now. He felt he ought to get up and do something, anything. But what was he to do? Where was he to go? What did he want? He asked himself, and the answer came that he did not know. End of page number 243. Now page 244. It seemed to him that he had always felt like that when he was a derelict, and even sometimes when he was surrounded by people and busy. During the days when he had worked, however, and come home to a meal, he had seldom been lonely, even though he was tired by work and suffered inconveniences. For he talked and heard people talk, played practical jokes on people, and slept rising to face the morning. That was life. Now, somehow, the essential loneliness of the soul, that apartness which he had succeeded in shattering by his zest and enthusiasm for work and for entering the lives of others, by the natural love he felt for others, that loneliness mingled with the thought of worklessness, foodlessness, aimlessness hung over his being. He realized suddenly that he had always come to something when he began to move, to act. For instance, he had met Prabha when he ran away from Shamnagar, the elephant driver who brought him to Bombay. Hari and he certainly wouldn't have met Ratan if he had not come to Bombay. But then there have been days, months and years, he said to himself, when I have gone on working and wandering alone. Still, I will go back to the mills and see what is happening. He shook himself, stretched his arms, yawned, got up and jumped down from the wagon. The beach was deserted except for the fishermen who were casting their nets. He walked up to the Chowpatty Bridge and saw the panorama of green, white and red houses spread under the lower ridges of the Malabar Hill. On the road, life seemed natural and ordinary, without any trace of the happenings of last night. The motor cars sped swiftly by, victorias and cycles. The boards on the shops greeted the rudimentary stare. One read, Auto Deluxe, another Bhartiya Watch Works, another the American Auto Part Company, a fourth Clinical Library of Dr. N.J. Modi, still another Bharat Swadeshi Stores. When he got to Parekh mansions, he saw some coolies, both men and women, bearing baskets of earth from a shop to a bullock cart which stood with the two bullocks harnessed to its shaft. A policeman stood at the crossroads. Munnu stopped and watched the bullocks empty. End of page number 244, now page 245. The beasts had curved horns and were grinding straw as they waited patiently without a lead, careless of the flies that sat on the ramp where the continual friction with the wood had bruised them. The shop had not opened yet, but men passed quickly by on the pavements, umbrellas on one hand and the lower edges of their loincloths in the other, flourishing their bare, dark brown legs. Manu watched them go by till it seemed to him that they were nothing but legs everywhere. What has happened? He wondered. Has last night's affair finished? Certainly everything seemed to be orderly this morning. And yet, he said to himself, it can't be. And he felt that all those men were cheating him with the conspiracy of silence, that they were all passing him by deliberately suppressing the secret of the insurrection. He ached for contact with someone to know what was happening. Only a crow came and settled on a window sill before him to see if it could pick up something. Munnu looked away. For a moment his mind was empty. Then he saw the policeman superintending the crossroads, talking to a rich Parsi. Munnu moved towards them, simulating the manner of a pauper, began to pick up the fallen leaves of trees from near the bullock cart. As far as the police are concerned, said the constable to the Parsi, the rumor about the kidnapping was groundless, and the police tried to broadcast a notice to restore confidence. But there was violence throughout the mill area and the town, and the whole strength of the police, including the armed police, had to be mobilized to keep the disorderly elements in check. And though so many outrages were committed, the Sarkar did not call in the military. The police have won the day. The condition of the town is better this morning. The coolies in the railway workshops and the mills have gone back to work. As you see, people are walking about normally. Munnu was now possessed by a fit of consciousness. He must get back to work. The mills had opened, so there was no strike. Hari must have gone to the factory. I will go, he said, and slunk away. He had hardly gone 100 yards when he heard two Congress volunteers engaged in a serious talk with a man in a suit who jotted down words in a notebook which he had opened from time to time. He slowed down, shaking his right foot as if he were hurt, then settled down and poured dust on it, pretending to treat the wound on his toe. End of page number 245. Now page 246. At 7:30 this morning, the one volunteer dictated. Alve and Khasleh labor leaders took a Mohammedan contractor named Rahim to the tea shop at the corner of Suparibang Road to come to some settlement with the Pathans. When an unknown Pathan smacked Alve on the face. Within half an hour, 3,000 to 4,000 mill hands came down in a large body with sticks to attack the Pathan camp in retaliation for the assault on Alve. A cordon of armed policemen with a show of great favoritism protected the Pathans. The main part of the mob went back, but some of them halted at the union office at the Damodar Thakurse Hall. The Deputy Commissioner of Police got the help of the army. Various platoons of the Warwickshire Regiment are spread over the town with machine guns, and the Home Secretary has wired to the Pune Brigade for more military aid. We have called a meeting of the Hindu and Muslim leaders here at the house of Mr. Sirla. At this moment, a limousine drew up by the pavement, and the attention of the congressmen turned to the tall, burly figure in princely clothes and Astrakhan decorated with ruby red crescent moons who emerged. Vande Mataram. Munnu heard the Congresswala greet His Majesty. He did not know who he was, but he was impressed and curious. What are your leaders doing? The dignitary exclaimed. What are the police and the government doing? What are the newly elected members of the corporation doing? What are the leaders of the youth movement doing? For a whole night the Pathans have been murdered by the Hindus, and the Congress has done nothing about it. If Miss Mayo came to India and wrote a chapter about children being kidnapped for sacrificial purposes, would you not deny it as a wicked act, a jibe? The congressmen kept quiet. The journalist with the notebook, however, thrust himself forward and asked, is the situation likely to develop into an all-India Hindu-Muslim conflict, Maulana Hazrat Ali? Of course it will, replied the Maulana. We are going to organize the Mohammedans for the purpose of self-defense. The Maulana's voice broke out excitedly. But Congress is forming a peace committee, said one of the congressmen. Yes, you are always talking of peace, said the Maulana. End of page number 246. Now 247. You talk of peace but mean war. Meanwhile, the Hindu hooligans or Kalba Devi have murdered 3 Mussalmans this morning, and 50 operatives of Mohammedan mills have been assaulted. We have just been to the King Edward Hospital. There are more Mohammedans wounded than Hindus. Well, Salam Maulana, said the journalist, and cleared off. Don't publish the interview, the Maulana shouted after him, but the man had cycled away. Another car rolled up. Munnu saw another dignitary emerge and hail the Mohammedan leader and the Congress volunteers with Vande Mataram. The Mohammedan seemed to take no notice of him as he walked into the palatial mansion. Pandit Madan Mohan Malabari, the new dignitary in immaculate khaddar, followed them. The Congress volunteers began to direct the chauffeurs of the cars to move up. The boy felt drawn towards the door of the house. He took advantage of the absence of the volunteers to go up and peer in. He could see only a long polished flight of stairs ascending up into the roof of the building. Go away, who are you? One of the Congress volunteers shouted as he returned to his post at the door. Munnu started, blushed a confession of guilt, and capered on his way.